Well, hello. Where have all of you been? Oh, wait a minute. I'm the one who hasn't been here. But you know what I learned a long time ago? When you've done something wrong, blame the other guy. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm blaming you because you haven't seen me, even though you haven't seen me because I haven't done anything recently. But I do have an excuse. I've been in San Francisco trying a case. We won. And then I said I would spend a lot of time preparing for that case, and there's things to be done in the aftermath of that case, and so I've been really tied up. And I'm not just a guy who sits here and prognosticates for a living. I'm supposed to be retired, but I just can't. Lawyers really never retire, so I haven't retired, and I actually I don't tell anybody this. It's between you and me. Fortunately, nobody watches this. That I actually enjoy being a lawyer. I like trying cases. I like winning cases. I can't play football anymore because my back hurts, because my leg hurts, and because I have no talent. That's, again, between you and me. Now, so why am I wasting your time? Well, I'm wasting your time because I'm not going to talk long. Of course, I always say that. I just want to talk a little bit about the results of the elections last night, where the Republicans did very poorly, and even they are acknowledging that. Even Sean Hannity, the guy who pretends to be an Irishman, is acknowledging the Republicans have a real problem with abortion. And I have a little take on that, and it has to do with Harry Truman. It has to do with John Kennedy. It has to do with Lyndon Johnson. It has to do with Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. And that is the Democrats losing the white Southern voters. And that started when Harry Truman, remember, I'm old even though I don't look it. And I don't look it because I lead an unhealthy lifestyle, which is the key to looking good. You look bad inside, but on the outside, you look pretty good. So, but I digress, which I always do. And so you were asking me about Harry Truman. So, in 1948, we had just come back from Paris. Now, we were in Paris because my father was a war hero. World War II, bombing in Afghanistan. I met my mother in North Africa, where she was a translator for the Red Cross. She was an expert in French. And after the war, we had status of forces. And what status of forces means, for those of you who've never looked it up, is that we occupy a country militarily. And we occupied France after World War II militarily. We were basically the government. And under the status of forces structure, if a GI commits a crime in a status of forces country, where we have forces there, that person can't be tried by the local authorities. He has to be courts-martialed by the United States government. So this particular one instance was where a GI who had been a big hero at Normandy raped and murdered a 14-year-old French girl. And the French were up in arms about it because they couldn't prosecute this guy, and they didn't trust the U.S. people to prosecute this guy. So Truman had a dilemma. He needed a lawyer to be a prosecutor, but he needed somebody who was a war hero, because this guy was a war hero, and Truman didn't want to send some desk jockey over there to prosecute a war hero. On the other hand, he needed somebody who was competent. He needed a lawyer. So my dad was on a plane headed over to Nuremberg. He was going to be trying those Nuremberg cases. And because after the war, my dad finished law school at Indiana University, which coincidentally, not really coincidentally, that's where I went to law school. So dad had basically just graduated from law school. And he was offered the chance to go try these cases at Nuremberg, and his plane was heading over this way. And what? you don't like my sound, my special effects, go watch another show on TV like Star Wars or something. If you don't want to watch Star Wars, watch it here. So there's my dad's plane. He's going over to Nuremberg. And all of a sudden the phone rings. Ring, 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 ring. It's me, Harry Truman. Well, it didn't really go exactly like that, but Truman did radio to the person, to the plane. He said, I want to talk to this Charles O'Connor who's going over to Nuremberg. So the pilot comes back and he says, Captain, it's only a captain. He says, Captain, it's the President of the United States on the phone. So Dad just laughed, he didn't drink, so if he would have been, he would have just asked him. Of course, the pilot was drinking, so Dad just thought he was drunk. And the pilot says, no, it really is. So Dad takes the call. If it was a practical joke. And, of course, how do you get practical jokes of calls to a plane that's on its way to Nuremberg But it was Truman. And Truman said told Dad he was diverting his plane over to Paris because he was putting my dad in charge of these status of forces prosecutions in Europe. So that was how Dad first met Truman. And so we went over. So we came over later, and we were there for a year. That fellow that raped and murdered that French girl, he was tried. Dad was the prosecutor. He was convicted, and there was a series of appeals, and this case dragged on and on and on. So from the time that they first started the trial until the case was finally over was almost 2 weeks. And yeah, they did not mess around in those days. That guy was tried, taken out and shot with the firing squad. And I was like, well, gee, wow, that's pretty bright. But these guys had just come out of a war where people were being killed right and left, so the value of human life was a little bit lower those days than it is now. We've never been in a war like that since. We've had either Vietnam but those were always fought by small groups of people. This was a war where the whole country was involved. So, but be that as it may, that was how we ended up in Paris. And a year later, this was in 1947. In 1948, we came back. Because of Truman, Dad was appointed the first assistant U.S. attorney in Southern District of Indiana. And so we came back, and that was right in the middle of this campaign for president, Truman's re-election. Actually, it was his first elected. He served out the rest of his term after Roosevelt died. And so Truman ran for president in 48. And so Truman just, I think it was in the spring of 48, ordered the integration of the U.S. Armed Services. Up until that point in time, blacks served in black units, everybody else served in the regular units. The blacks were always segregated. And even Roosevelt wouldn't integrate them because he didn't want to lose, guess what? The Southern Democratic vote. And he had a lot of back and forth with Eleanor Roosevelt, who was a strong civil rights advocate, but he wouldn't budge. Truman did. And Truman was, this redneck Southerner, didn't go to college, and he was from Southern Missouri, near where I went to high school, and those people were still pretty much Southerners. And Truman was a Southerner. But Truman said, he also was a gutsy little guy, and he said, that's wrong. These people are fighting and dying for our country. They're going to serve in the same units with everybody else, and I don't care who likes it. That's just the way he talked to me. He had these little glasses. I don't care who likes it. So, anyway, he integrated the armed services. And as a result of that, he damn near lost the election. And I don't know how many of you remember Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond was not a bad guy, but he was a son of the South. He's from South Carolina. And so he broke with the Democratic Party. Not only did he not support Truman for his election bid, he ran his own in his own party, the Dixiecrat Party. He ran basically as an independent. So he was really going after. He figured he'd carry the South, and at a minimum, he could throw this thing into the House of Representatives. So that was the beginning of the effort to peel the South away from the Democratic Party, and it didn't work because Truman was a Southerner. The Southerners still appreciated what Roosevelt had done for them, like little things like rural electrification. So they actually had electricity in the South, which they didn't have before that. And so they appreciated Roosevelt, and they liked Truman. Everybody liked Truman because he was a fighter. He's a gutsy little, like a banty rooster. But that was the beginning of the erosion of the Democratic Party. Then fast forward, we have Jack Kennedy as president, and then the summer before Kennedy was assassinated, that same year, he was assassinated in November, and I think it was June or July. He gave his speech introducing the Civil Rights Bill, and that was an amazing speech. I think he gave it. I forget where he gave it. I know he gave the one speech at the University of Americas. I think that had to do with the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. So I forget where he gave this, but he gave it in Washington D.C. And it was I was struck with it at the time. I was working as a lifeguard then. It was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year in college, and I was just so struck by that speech. And a lot of people, like my father, who at that time was not a big civil rights supporter, he liked Martin Luther King, but he didn't agree with what he was doing. And Dad was so moved by that speech by Kennedy that he completely changed his outlook and became a strong supporter of the civil rights movement. And it was Kennedy was saying was right, but it was also the way Kennedy spoke. And it's one of the reasons he was, in my opinion, the best president in my lifetime, including Roosevelt. But he was passionate, he was honest, he cared, he was funny, but he got his message across to you, and he was persuasive. And I'll say that again. He was persuasive, which is one of the most important things that a leader can be, is persuasive, and he was one of the few really persuasive presidents in my lifetime. So, Kennedy pushed the Civil Rights Bill. As a result of that, there was a lot of anger and animosity toward Kennedy all over the Deep South. And then, of course, he was assassinated in Houston, where, ironically, he'd received a huge, warm welcome when he arrived there, but then he was killed. So, but for that, I'd just as soon not have the warm welcome. But, so then Lyndon Johnson picked up the banner, and they passed the Civil Rights Bill, and then they passed the Voting Rights Bill. And I remember Johnson said something about, with the signing of this bill, I've just lost the South to the Democratic Party for a generation. Well, it wasn't a generation, it's more like 3 generations. So that was the history of leading up to that. And who leaned into that with great vigor was Richard Nixon. And he ran on what he called the Southern Strategy. So he was kind of like a polite version of George Wallace. And he saw that's my target audience. Those Southern Democrats are going to be Republicans. And, fueled by their anger at Kennedy and Johnson and still some latent resentment of Truman, they were able to move these people because that's what they really cared about in the South in those days. You know what else they cared about? They cared about their preachers. So those Southern preachers, mainly, Southern Baptist preachers, fundamentalists all. And among the things that those preachers cared about was abortion. So suddenly you have the world's greatest hypocrite, in my opinion, Ronald Reagan. Why do I say that? Because Ronald Reagan was pro-life. And Ronald Reagan went to those Southern preachers and he got them all riled up and got them to support the Republican Party. Yes, 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 yes. And the issue that he used to get them was not civil rights, it was abortion. Nothing riles up a Southern preacher like abortion. And then they formed an unholy alliance, no pun intended, with the leaders of the Catholic Church. That didn't work that well with the Catholics because even though there are a lot of Catholics who are against abortion, there's still a handful, like my family, that voted Republican because of abortion. Most Catholics, they may agree with the church on abortion, but it doesn't impact the actual political decisions. But in the South, these people listened to their preachers. And those preachers were pushing that, and Ronald Reagan, one of those preachers behind him, so he came out strongly, about as strong as you can get against abortion. Abortion is terrible. It's wrong. How come nobody mentioned during that campaign, which I remember like it was yesterday, that Ronald Reagan signed into law the amendment to the California Constitution making abortion a constitutional right, just like they did in Ohio the other day? He signed that with great glee, with great enthusiasm, with a great big movie star smile. He was all for the right to choose, until it came time to cultivate the favor of the Southern Baptist white preacher organizations like Jerry Falwell. And suddenly he couldn't think of anything that he hated more than the right to an abortion. So that's where that brings us up to the present. And this could change the whole makeup of the country again, as it relates to political alignment. Because what the Republicans have finally realized is that you can't go to the people and say, abortion needs to be outlawed, because they'll throw you out of office. So what do they try to do? They say, well, because this fellow Youngkin, typical politician, he says, I'm reasonable. The Democrats would have you have abortions like right up until just before the child is born. Now there is a procedure for that, but that's very rare, and it occurs in a situation where the child has an enlarged head filled with fluid, and the child, it's a tragedy when it happens. That people don't want abortions, but if they don't kill that baby, it's going to make sure that the mother can never have another child again, or might even lose her life. And so in those rare circumstances, they do that. But the way these Republicans talk about it is like, oh yeah, just any old time, because it's, it's just another birth control. We can do it all the way up until the minute before the child is born, and we can and we're fine with that. Hey, yeah, let's go out and party. Which of course completely misrepresents that whole issue. But nonetheless, that was where they went on this thing. So what they've done is they said, okay, all of a sudden they saw that when they were actually in debates, like in Kansas, and that was the issue, man, they got their clock clean. So in comes Glenn Youngkin walking in. My special effects are pretty good, you got to admit. I mean, what am I working with here? Nothing, right? I got to use my fingers now. The plane. Youngkin walking, and then my hand even looks like Governor Youngkin, doesn't it? Yankin, or whatever the hell his name is. Looks like him. Oh, here he is with his wife. Look at the two of them walking side by side. I know what you're thinking. I should be making movies. So, I should be going to the movies instead of doing this program. I heard that. Look, Mr. Santos, just because they didn't kick you out of the House of Representatives doesn't mean it's carte blanche and you can come in here and make fun of me in my own dining room, living room, Francois' bedroom, whatever the hell you want to call it. So, what? Oh, yeah, Francois says hi to everybody. I thought you were asleep. French dogs, you never know what they're up to. So, anyhow, Governor Youngkin says, well, hello. I'm not like those Democrats who want you to have abortions all day long. But on the other hand, I think maybe we Republicans have been a little too strong. So here's what we're going to do. I say we set the limit at 15 weeks. Now that should please everybody. Who can disagree with that? And then he proceeded to lose the House and the Senate, to lose the state House, and the Democrats increased their lead in the state Senate. Gee, what wrong? What went wrong, Governor Youngkin? Youngkin, whatever the hell your name is. What went wrong was he didn't get the fact that people were actually buying into the basic fundamental principle of the Republican Party since they were trying to defend big business back in the 1900s, which is the government should stay out of it. People don't give a damn if the government is saying 15 weeks, 22 weeks, 1 week. What they're telling you, Republicans, Governor Youngkin, is it ain't your decision. It's a decision between the person who's pregnant and her doctor and her family and her preacher. It's personal. It's not your business. Stay the hell out. That message, I think, is beginning to get through to these Republican stalwarts about whom everything is about politics, everything is about power. So now what do? because they rode that anti-abortion thing because of Roe versus Wade, which is the worst thing that ever happened to the Democrats. They rode that thing in on selling this all across the board to get the support of these preachers. Well, now they know that if they keep pushing this abortion thing, they're going to lose everything, because that's one thing that people agree upon regardless of party. The government should stay the hell out of people's private lives. And lo and behold, now what are they going to do? What would you do? Let's say you're running nationally, you're running for president, and the abortion issue is front and center. It's square. And if you're asked about, hey, if Congress passes a federal law prohibiting abortions or restricting abortions in any way, shape, or form, will you sign that law? Okay? Now, I want to slow down here and start over again. No, I'm not going to start over again with everything I've said. Are you kidding me? I wouldn't put you through that, even if you'd be willing to live through that. I wouldn't. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not that cruel. I'm a little cruel. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not that cruel. Okay, I am that cruel, but I could never get away with it, so I'm not going to even try. So, put yourself in the mind of a Republican candidate for president. Let's see, Donald Trump. First place, Donald Trump has all this tape of him saying, "Look at me. I got rid of Roe versus Wade. I'm the one who made it possible for Republicans to come in there and outlaw abortion all over the place. That's me. I did that. Look at me. I'm so proud. I'm so pleased with myself. I'm so proud." You think he's going to go out there and say that again? He's going to say, "Well, that wasn't me. That was artificial intelligence. I had nothing to do with that. That was not. No way does that in any way, shape, or form reflect my view on the issue." So he's asked in a debate, Mr. Trump, what? Mr. Trump, over here, posing for the cameras again. Mr. Trump, I'm here, the moderator. Let me ask you. Here comes a question from Joe Peterson from Jacksonville, Florida. And Joe Peterson wants to know if the Republicans, House and Senate, pass a bill that restricts in any way, shape, or form the ability of people to obtain abortions, would you sign that as president? Yes or no? What do you do? Role play. Put yourself in that position. Don't just look to me for all the answers. Okay, so here's your choice. No, I would not sign that because I don't think the government should interfere. Bingo! Automatically, he's lost every preacher in the South, and he's lost a certain number of bishops in the rest of the country too, Catholic bishops. Bingo! He's lost them. Not only has he lost them, they'll turn against him, and I'll get all of these people in the South saying, "Well, wait a minute, I'm not going to support him. He's for abortion." Oh, so you do that, or do you say, yes, yes, I would sign that. Yes, I would. I think it's a good idea. Boom, right away he's lost everybody else. So what do you do? So this could change the whole Southern strategy of the Republican Party, and really change because this alignment of the Southern Democrats, which is, the Southern Democrats used to vote all the time with the Republicans in the House and the Senate, but they used to vote for the Democrats in the presidential election, and they stopped doing that. Well, that could start swinging back the other way. So it's going to be interesting to see what Republicans do with this dilemma. So that was it. That was all that talk and nonsense. I just wanted to talk about that one thing because it was interesting to me from an historical perspective, and I hope it was interesting to you too. And if it wasn't, well, then I curse you to a fate worse than death after you die. I'm just kidding. You'll be fine. Yeah. Say a prayer though. Yeah. No, not for me. For you. Bye.